Welcome back to the local perspective. It's been a while. I'm Jerry Deschane with the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and we're taking a look at law enforcement today. I want to thank, before we get started with our really terrific guest today, I want to give a special shout out to the Wisconsin community media people, especially to K-Sun in Sun Prairie with Mara and Jeff, for figuring out how to do the local perspective in a socially distant and appropriate manner without me wearing a mask so that you can't hear me. But it's great to be back. We've got a really cool guest today, so let's dive into it. Our guest for the local perspective is the Chief of Police of the City of Jefferson, Ken Pileggi. Ken has been a lifelong law enforcement officer, and we're going to talk about law enforcement. Wisconsin has a lot going on, a lot to brag about in this arena. So, Chief, first of all, thank you very much for being here. How are things in Jefferson?
Busy as always, Jerry, and I really appreciate you and the league and giving me this opportunity to chat with you today. It means a great deal to us.
Well, and I hope busy for a police chief is a good thing and not a bad thing.
Yeah, it can be both. It can be both. We love peace.
Chief, you know, I was reading through your bio, and we should tell everyone, read the January issue of the Municipality. And Chief Pileggi has a 37-year career in law enforcement. First of all, sir, thank you for your service, but that's incredible. Was this something you always wanted to do?
Well, first off, thank you, Jerry, and thanks for the municipality opportunity for myself and my colleagues to do those articles on law enforcement. This, for me, from the time I can remember walking, I wanted to be a policeman. I've been very blessed in my lifetime that my dad was a policeman. He started in 1968 as a Marinette County Traffic Patrol officer. And my earliest memories I can remember is of the squad car warming up in the morning on a cold winter morning. I was just big enough to walk, and I just looked at it, thought it was so cool, saw the uniform, and I was so proud of him and so proud of what he did, and listening to the stories of how he helped people, some of the scrapes he had gotten in, and I just thought to myself, from a very young age, I don't know if that's how we are made or wired, or it's a calling. But in my case, I believe it was something that was wired into me prior to me being born, and it's something that I've been very passionate about and very blessed to be at this point. And I can't believe that I'm just about starting my 38th year already. It goes amazing. Super fast, Jerry. It goes super fast. I wish I was younger so I could continue to serve. I love it. Truly love this profession.
Well, and again, thank you for doing that. I do have to go off script here, though, Ken. You said your dad was a Marinette County Sheriff's deputy. He didn't mention any hoodlums from the Crivets area, did he? Just asking for a friend.
Not from the Deschane family. I'd never heard that name come up in anything. So, my dad actually, he actually was a Wisconsin State Trooper for a number of years, and he was Chief of Police for the City of Medford for a couple of years. We moved around a lot, as you might surmise from my talking, and he ended up Lieutenant of Public Safety at Marquette University before he left the profession. So by the time he was leaving in 1984 is when I was blessed to be hired in the village of Mukwonago as a full-time police cadet.
And you've served in Mukwonago and now as chief in Jefferson. Tell me a little bit about Jefferson. How big's the community for those who aren't familiar with it?
Jefferson's about 8,000 people. We're nestled almost center in the county. We're the county seat. We're right in between Dane County, Waukesha, Milwaukee County. It's a growing community, very blue-collar community with a lot of great people, a lot of tremendous support for not only the police service, but fire, EMS, all of our services. We're very blessed to have that. It's a great community to live in, and I would encourage folks to come on down and visit us and see what we have to offer here.
Ken, I want to talk about how policing has evolved in Wisconsin, where we've been, where we're going, that sort of thing. But before I get there, you talk about how you got the gene from your dad, but it didn't end there, did it?
No, it didn't. I actually have my youngest son, who's 28 years old, Tyler. He's a City of Milwaukee policeman. He started as a police aide in 2011 at the ripe old age of 19, like his old man did when he was a cadet. And in 2014, he hit the streets, and Tyler works District 7, third shift in Milwaukee with some really, really great people, great supervisors, great department, a lot of really great people in the city of Milwaukee. And my wife and I kind of are surprised because Tyler was a very shy kid, and for him to end up from a Mugwanago suburb as a city of Milwaukee policeman when he was a little guy, I would have never guessed it. But from the time he was little, he was like me. He truly, he was enamored when I come home for lunch or whatever with the squad in Mugwanago, and he'd always be looking in it and always interested in it. And now there my boy is out there doing the same profession in the big city world. Dad's always been a small city cop, and Tyler's a big city cop with a department that has a lot of really great people in it and a lot of opportunity.
So when he comes over on Sunday nights for dinner, does he say, Dad, you guys are doing it all wrong. This is the way it should be done.
He lets me know how screwed up our administrations are, as leaders. So, from that boot officer on the street. But the wonderful thing about it, Jerry, and my dad is gone now, but is that with the stresses that police officers see day in and day out, and the really difficult situations, and my son sees a lot of really violent crime, and it's really unfortunate. He sees a lot of human anguish, and it wears on you. So Jerry and I kind of joke because I do have a place in Merrimack County, and so it's great when we can get together and we go up there and we're away from our his mom and my daughter-in-law and family, and it gives him a chance to vent and a little bit of therapeutic, because I kind of know where he's coming from, living through not near the volume of things that he said, but living through some pretty tough times and some pretty rough things with sometimes really bad things that people do to each other, unfortunately.
Yeah. Ken, let's back up a little bit. So you've been in law enforcement for 37 years. Your dad was in it before you. What are some of the biggest things that have changed? How has it changed? How is it still the same?
Well, what has changed really, Jerry, when I started in 1984, we went from paper reports and cardboard to migrating to technology. And that technology has evolved just rapidly. I mean, to the point now that police officers with body cameras, squad car cameras, people with cell phones. When I was a young police officer in late 1980s, I still remember, I still in fact have my first cell phone I bought from Sears with a big bag and an antenna on it, and we thought that was just the cat's meow when we're driving in northern Illinois going to my sister-in-law's, and we can talk in the car to somebody on the telephone, like the old Cannon series for those older folks when Bill Cannon's talking in his Lincoln on a telephone that was clearly a prop, to where we are today with the information, the records management systems we have out there, the computer-aided dispatch systems, the equipment in the squad cars that we have. I mean, I would have never thought. In 1989 was the first time that Mugwanago we had what we called an MDT, a mobile data terminal in the squad, and it was limited to running license plate numbers and persons' driving records and warrants or wants. And now, I mean, my goodness, you can access an agency's entire database with proper access and proper CJIS requirements right in the tip with your squad car. It's been a remarkable technological change that it's been tremendously helpful in helping us more wisely enforce laws, I think.
Well, Ken, information technology, I mean, that's something that we all deal with, right? I mean, I finally took my phone and took it off the counter here because it wouldn't stop ringing and pinging and dinging and doing all those things that phones do. Has a police officer's job gotten more? Now, granted, it's better, you've got access to better data faster, but does that also make their job more complicated, a little more difficult? Is there training there that wasn't there 25 years ago now?
There is. Built into almost all agencies' field training programs is clearly an understanding of the information technology, what you need to do when you're running somebody, when you're accessing these databases. There's strict state-imposed limits on where that information can go. As far as the job itself, from a training perspective, I've seen a tremendous amount. When I started, Jerry, in 1987, I carried a baton, six-shooter, basically a revolver, and speed loaders, a set of handcuffs, and basically that was about it. A couple of years later, it evolved into us migrating towards pepper spray, which was a less lethal option in dealing with folks that would be combative with you, to the point where we are now to the point where we're seeing electronic control devices. You see less lethal shotguns, which shoot beanbags, which are less lethal options that basically it's a control alternative as we train it to try and resolve any kind of violent situation. If we can't resolve it with our presence or with a big focus, and that's something else, Jerry, I wanted to touch on, is there's been a huge focus on professional communication with police officers, a 40-hour block of that, to teach these officers. We, especially newer generations of officers, and you held up your phone before, Jerry, they text, but when it comes to communicating, you need to teach them how to talk to people, actively listen, and understand that officers are trained. We would much rather have somebody be a compliant person versus having to, go through our escalate through our intervention options and then have to de-escalate down. We would rather. There's an old saying I was taught by an old sergeant, old fat sergeant, that always taught me that you get more bees with honey than vinegar. And that's what I have found, is listening to people, listening to what they have to say, and then explaining what's happening to them. And that's how I've taught, how I've trained, goes a really far way. People just want to be heard and understood. And that's, when you talk about, like I reiterated, going from, a baton to actually a spray, or going to, if it's that now you'll hear the taser, these less lethal options. Those are tools that I never started with, that thankfully have saved countless people as time have gone on. Obviously a baton is it's a very brutal weapon. It's something that you use if it's called a protective alternative, where you're being assaulted and you have no other choice. Any head strike with a baton is deadly force. So the officers are taught focus strikes on elbows and knees, but it can do devastating damage. In my career, Jerry, I'm thankful to say I've presented my baton on several occasions. I've never had to strike anybody. I've gotten compliance out of it. But when pepper spray came out, that was something that was, when you had that quintessential no person, after trying to communicate with them, and then the follow through considerations, making sure after you use that type of a piece of equipment and you spray somebody or expose them, or if you do tase somebody, that you make sure there's follow through right away to make sure you get the medical, get them under control, number one, and then get them the treatment that they need. So, and it's what I've been sprayed in my career and training probably 9 or 10 times. I hate it. I don't like it. I've been tased several times myself. I don't like it, but it gives me an understanding of that type of application of a control device. It was important to me to understand, if this is a tool I'm going to carry, I want to know what the effects were personally. And boy, oh boy, you get zapped. And once I can get my faculties back, my hands go behind my back really quick. So those are some things that, as we moved on, and now you'll see in my squads we carry the basically it's a beanbag round in a orange shotgun that's a less lethal, gives you some distance from somebody, to try and to resolve a manner in a less lethal fashion for somebody that's going through some kind of crisis possibly, or somebody that just simply put does not want to go to jail for whatever reason, and we just need to try and get them into custody safely.
My guest is Ken Pileggi. In addition, I should say at this point, I should have said it earlier, in addition to being the chief of the Jefferson Police Department, Ken is the president of the Wisconsin Chief of Police Association. Chiefs of Police Association. Somewhere in there you get the
Something
idea.
Like
and he has a 37-year career in law enforcement. Ken, we've talked about how the technology has changed and training needs have changed. What about community expectations? Does the public expect different things of you now than they did back in the 1990s?
They absolutely do, Jerry. When I started even in the 80s, we were starting to migrate towards, when you look at some of the different theories, the broken windows theory of, policing small things to kind of we found that, lighting, keeping neighborhoods looking depleted or blighted, actually led to reductions in crime. But many police departments evolved. They went from a very reactionary model. In other words, you're responding to calls for service, to say the community is starting to say, hey, wait a minute, we need to have more engagement from our police department. Hence, starting to move forward and saying, you know what, all of a sudden, as you alluded to, Jerry, the late 80s, early 90s, the term community-orientated policing was coined. And that is exactly what it means. It meant that we needed to start reaching out to all of our different demographic groups. We needed to start reaching out to all of our service groups. Anybody would try, the school resource program officers started really coming into vogue, doing the DARE teaching, the drug resistance teaching, and the things that have evolved now where it's like you have your national nights out, where you have your citizens and your police officers come together. You have your coffee with a cop events, shop with a cop at Christmas, which is a great event. Officers that are very engaged in the community, and we're seeing that more and more, and we're seeing agencies, even larger agencies, with a much better success rate where the officers are actually getting more involved in the community within their sectors or their communities themselves, where they are actually engaging with people and getting to talk with people and hear what their concerns are. I'm very proud that in the city of Jefferson, we have an approximately 15% Hispanic population, and on a quarterly basis at least, I have a Hispanic outreach committee meeting. I have a very good relationship with the chair of our Hispanic outreach committee for Jefferson area. Mm-hmm. And anytime she has any issues that come up, anytime that there's any problems, she has my personal cell. I'm a phone call away. And we're going to try and even build that coalition even more. My mayor has been involved with that. These are the types of things that we really need to start engaging our entire communities. And that's something that you're absolutely right when you're spot on, Jerry, when you look at this reactive approach to a much more proactive approach, and then really encompassing those community, vital community components. You have to have, especially with all of the political rhetoric that goes around, I need to have willing complainants and willing victims that are not afraid of the police coming to their house if they're a victim of a crime or a domestic violence incident because they're afraid of their status in our country. I mean, that was one of the big takeaways from the Hispanic outreach group with me was that there was such a reluctance, and then learning to understand the culture and their perspectives of police from where they have originated from was eye-opening to me. And that helps us when we're training our officers, teaching our officers in how to interact with folks. It's a win-win. I always say we police with our community. We don't police our community. It is a partnership. It is something we need willing witnesses and helpers to call and report things to us. And the bottom line is it's a complete team effort. That's why I love the National Night Out efforts that many police departments do. Totally, it's so much fun to watch the kids and the families and all the community members get together with the cops on a fun level. Because most of the time people think, uh-oh, here come the police. It's a bad thing, and it's not a bad thing. It really is not. Even in the schools, the school resource officers, I know this past year has been really challenging with everything going on. But my experience, I've worked hard with our school superintendent. We have a tremendously excellent relationship here with the Jefferson Area School District and Superintendent Rolfson and the entire school board. We work together collaboratively in training even our parochial schools, the teachers and the staff, and it's just with budget restraints, and I know the league has been the forefront of this with the levy limits that many of us are facing in our communities and our schools with the referendum issues. It's hard to bring on staff. My experience in McQuantico was that we did have school resource officers, tremendously positive programs that built great relationships with kids from the elementary all the way through the high school age. And I think those are really important relationships that we should still continue to focus on, especially with the Department of Justice's Office of School Safety. I mean, we've come a really long way, Jerry, I think, and I'm not saying we don't have work to do. We have a lot of work to do yet, but I think that as we're moving forward, all of our stakeholders need to come together as a team, as a community, because we are civilian police officers. I know they say we're sworn, but the bottom line is we are truly civilian police officers. And like I say, the bottom line I've always stuck in my head is we police with our community. We don't police our community.
Ken, I mean, and I can see that just as the community evolves, policing that community is going to evolve. The pandemic, I mean, that must be almost a management nightmare for you. What has that done to how you do your job? And I guess I'm kind of curious, has there been any positives? Is there less traffic? Are there upsides to it? Or are you like me, you just want it to be over?
Oh, I just want it to be over. Oh my God, I think we're all in the same. You kind of alluded at your monologue, Jerry, with your the mask over your face, and so we can hear. But it has posed tremendous challenges for not only police officers, but our brave healthcare workers on the front lines trying to deal with this horrible pandemic. Our EMS services, our squads roll on 70 to 80% of our EMS calls, which is very typical. Even my son in Milwaukee, they roll on a lot of EMS calls too. And to try and protect your workforce and put good policies in place about the required masking, having to buy the apparatus and the expense. And we had the CARES Act funding, which was tremendously helpful to communities throughout the state of Wisconsin as the state administered that. For people don't think about squad cars, but decontaminating your cars when you take somebody into custody that tells you they're COVID positive. How the jails have had to deal with that, the correctional officers have had to deal with it. It's been a complete shift in how we have had to deal with people, and it's something that the masking, and then when we initially went through this, and we all remember last February and March, and we were all kind of in the dark. The science was trying to catch up, everything was trying to catch up. We were in initial lockdowns. That had posed some significant challenges for communities and the local leaders because of those lockdowns that were mandated, and ultimately the Wisconsin Supreme Court allowed businesses to open up again. So that took a little bit off of us because of those calls, but it was still important that people did manage social distancing, limit crowd sizes. I think everywhere you go, 95% of the places, people now know we have to wear masks. That the bottom line is, even if you don't believe it's whatever your personal belief is, you sure don't want to be an asymptomatic carrier and spread that to anybody else. And in the police world, what was so bizarre, Jerry, as we were learning this was we were actually, our standard operating procedures changed to have people meet us outside of their house for complaints unless it was literally physical violence going on inside. And to this very day, some of that is still occurring. Keeping distance from folks, and you're right, traffic enforcement this past year has really dropped down because essentially it's when you're getting up within 2-3 feet of somebody when you're making a initial contact on a traffic stop, and officers are wearing masks, and we have to really try and protect ourselves. And unfortunately, I just read, that fatality rates went up because there's been risky behavior associated with less enforcement on the roads with some drivers. I've seen some studies that way. So it's just, and my son, like he said, in Milwaukee, reckless driving is a huge problem. So it's been it's been a very challenging time for not only police, but for fire, EMS, and especially those heroes that work at our healthcare facilities that have to confront this every single day.
You know, Ken, I'm just looking at the clock here, and I knew this was going to happen. I've got another 6 or 7 really cool things I want to talk to you about, but we are going to run out of time. But I do want to talk about recruitment. I know that's a constant challenge for police chiefs. We're in the, we're seeing the graying of old people like me, not like yourself. You're going to be around forever. But what's your pitch to young people today? Is this a good time to be a police officer?
This is a great time to be police officers, and I would tell young people, we need your perspectives, we need your insights, we need your thoughts. The bottom line is we need all that. This is to me, this is the most noble profession on the face of this planet. When you look at the history of policing, not only now, but in the world back when Templar Knights guarded the kingdoms. I mean, the bottom line is that it was service above self. It is a rewarding career. It is a stressful career, but it is by far an awesome career. I always tell the recruits I trained, and when I had the benefit of teaching at Waukesha County Technical College several years in the associate program, it's a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. You can have a lot of fun with this. It's really enjoyable to work with people, and it doesn't happen often. It's happening more often now, but boy, when you help somebody, or there's a thank you, or you get, I can't tell you, Jerry, this past Christmas time, the goodies and the treats and all the wonderful well wishes that we got in a really difficult year with what happened last year, and it's very uplifting, and it is it is one of the most noble, rewarding professions on the face of the planet. I would encourage any young person considering going into this profession, by all means, do it. Policing in Wisconsin requires an associate's degree or 60 credits. Bachelor's degrees are very much preferred, but at this point, we are looking at just trying to get folks to come on into this profession and recruit people we're trying at the college levels to get folks to come in here. And I'm going to tell you, you're not going to make a heck of a lot of money, but you're going to get a heck of a lot of reward out of it. Think of this, Jerry, I always tell them, you start in police work, police officers are on 24/7, 365, like other workers. You are captain, graveyard, midnight shift for a number of years, and weekends, holidays cease to exist for you. That means if you are going to come into this profession, 4th of July, when everybody else is getting ready to go to the cookout or the barbecue, you're suiting up to go to work. And you're going to deal with what happens later on when people drink a lot of adult beverages at times. So at the end of the day, those are really big trade-offs. I mean, weekends, again, when you're working those shifts, it's something you have to be able to accept. And I've taught recruits that are like, wow, this isn't a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 gig, dude. This is like you're working a 5242 or a 5253, and you're working midnight to 8, not including assembly time. So, and that doesn't include overtime as well. But there's such a camaraderie. And then when you get to work with the great community members you have, and the great representatives that we have across the state of Wisconsin, I don't care if it's city councils, town boards, or village boards, county boards, there's tremendous amount of support for law enforcement in Wisconsin. I'm very proud of that, and it's really important to have. And that's why what your organization does, Jerry, really helps foster those.
Ken, we're down to our last couple of minutes here, but reflecting, 37 years, an amazing career. Again, thank you for that service. We talked about a lot of things that have changed, the technology, the information available to you, community demands. What hasn't changed about being a police officer? What is still the same?
Oh boy, I always say, policing on its face, we talked about the tactics that have changed, but when the human behaviors that we encounter haven't changed. So in other words, you're going to deal with a wide array of things with people we deal with. And I always say policing is it's the craft of people and reading people. And we're not psychiatrists, we're not psychologists, but we get really good at engaging with people and understanding when you talk to somebody if they're a special needs person, when you're talking to somebody that may be drug dependent or impaired on alcohol, or somebody that's really having a really tough, going through a mental crisis. Those still don't change. We're human beings, and at times, unfortunately, some human beings, regardless of what that crisis is, they can react very violently, and that can be the family, friends, other citizens, or police officers. So I would say, essentially, Jerry, those haven't changed. I think the way we deal with it has changed, and I think we're getting better at it. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely, always room for improvement, especially with all these stakeholders coming in now. So at the end of the day, we're people. Humans are humans, and they behave how they behave, and we just gotta all kind of put our heads together, especially with the issues that are rearing their heads with mental health and drug addiction, especially with what we've been seeing with this pandemic and some of the byproducts, the harm that has brought.
Well, and we're going to have to leave it there. Ken, we should have you back. My guest has been Ken Pileggi. He's the Jefferson Police Chief, but also the head of the Wisconsin Chiefs of Police Association. Ken, thank you so much for being here. I'm Jerry Deschane. Everyone, thanks for joining us on The Local Perspective.